Welcome, everyone. My name is Ann Kester. I'm one of the facilitators for the Women Who Stay initiative here at Holy Trinity. I'm also the coordinator of the RCIA process here. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the Women Who Stay initiative at Holy Trinity. It's an initiative that was started 5 years ago now, which is a little hard to believe. Started first as a study of women in the scriptures, and it continues today with really lifting up the voices and the witness of women in the church. So we primarily are on Zoom, but we're working our way back towards some in-person programming, just like our event is today. In 2019, we committed to an annual lecture that would bring a woman who contributes much to the church to us. We started with Sister Barbara Reed. Some of you might remember that. We were all set to go in 2020, and the Friday before the Sunday of the event, we were shut down because of the pandemic. So we've been on hold for 4 years, but we're very happy to reinstitute our annual lecture today with Sister Catherine Vincie. So I would like to introduce to you Sister Catherine Vincie as she prepares to give her talk on a view of the liturgy, the ideal and the real. Sister Catherine Vincie is a member of the Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary, Eastern American area, for which she has served as the provincial counselor since 2015. She received a bachelor's in piano performance from Marymount Manhattan College. Tell her to show you her ring from her bachelor's degree, which we were admiring earlier. It's just a beautiful blue stone. I'm like, I went to the wrong college. And she also has an MDiv, a Master's of Divinity from Yale Divinity School and Institute of Sacred Music. She's a musician also. She received her PhD in liturgical studies from the Catholic University of America, right here in DC, in 1990, and was on the faculty of the Aquinas Institute of Theology as professor of liturgical and sacramental theology from 1995 to 2015. She is the author of The Role of the Assembly and Christian Initiation, which I have used, and also the author of Celebrating Divine Mystery and Worship in the New Cosmology. They're all on my shelf, Catherine. I've used them all. They're excellent books. As well as 50 articles on Eucharist, initiation, liturgy, and justice, and the liturgical year, among many other topics. Catherine also edited a book on Catholic preaching, which was published by Liturgical Press. And she is a member of the North American Academy of Liturgy, serving as vice president and then president from 2011 to 2012, and also the Catholic Academy of Liturgy. And she was a guest member of the International Commission on English in the Liturgy Advisory Board from 1998 to 2000. If you're wondering what the International Commission on English in the Liturgy is all about, commonly known as ISOL. It deals with translations of liturgical texts. That is no easy task. Catherine is known in the field of liturgy as a gifted scholar, teacher, trusted voice, and mentor. Personally speaking, Catherine's outstanding work has certainly informed my own teaching and writing in liturgy. And it is truly an honor and a delight to welcome her to Holy Trinity. What we will do today is that Catherine's talk is in 3 parts. After the first part, we'll do about 5 minutes of Q&A. We'll do the same after the second part. And then after the third part, we'll open it up for a longer Q&A. All right, so please welcome Sister Catherine.
Well, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be with you. I have to apologize for my voice. I'm usually not this low, but I'm on the end of a cold, so this is what happened. So I hope I can get through this all right. Well, I'm very glad to be back in Washington and to be touching base again with this parish, because it's been such a center of hope and life for so many people for so many years. So it's really a privilege for me to be invited back to this place. I used to tap in here every now and then, but I know it was just so life-giving for so many people. So I'm really pleased to be a part of your program. All right, now let me tell you what I'm going to do so you don't start throwing things at me too soon. I'm going to do the first section on an ideal understanding of the liturgy. I am still convinced that we as a Catholic Christian community don't know as much about the liturgy as we could. So I don't want to be insulting to any of you, but I just want to cover some basic facts about Catholic liturgy. And then after that, I have an interlude that's called Get a Grip, which is, yeah, I can only live with the ideal understanding of liturgy for just so much in an hour before I have to start saying, but there's a critique that needs to be done as well. So if you bear with me for the positive presentation of it, and then a critique in the second half of my paper. So just to let you know what's going on. All right? So we have some really basic questions. What is it? Who does it? And how do we do it? Really basic questions. But the answers are not so self-evident. As far as I understand the liturgy, and I could not do the work in my field without believing that over history, the liturgy has been the expression of authentic religious experiences of people in the 1st century, the 5th century, the 15th century, and our own century. There would be no reason to take our own understanding of the liturgy seriously if we were going to check off those of the 15th or the 12th or the 4th century. That doesn't mean we have to do it the same way, but I'm trying to say there's something authentic in religious experience that works its way into public ritual. And that's what we want to talk a little bit about. So there's a dynamic relationship of human persons and divine mystery that's at the heart of the liturgy. It's the what that comes to expression. In addition, that expression can engender deeper relationships between human persons and divine mystery. It can. It might not always, but it can. What do I get out of it? I get invited into a divine-human dialogue. That sounds pretty big to me. That's big stuff. We make tremendous claims of our liturgy. We say it's the access to a divine-human relationship. Or at least it could be. When I was at CUA in the late 80s, I studied with Mary Collins. Some of you may know her quite well in this room. And I was so struck by her metaphor for the liturgy that it has stayed with me all these years. And she says, liturgy is a package tour of the holy by those who have been there. That's kind of interesting. So let's just visually unpack what that means a little bit. A package tour. You all know about package tours to Greece or to Italy or to Tour de France or Rocky Mountains. You're used to the fact that there's some places you haven't been yet and somebody is going to give you better access because they've been there. And it's a package tour of the holy. Well, how do you grab hold of the holy? Sometimes it's revealed in nature, embodied in nature. Sometimes it's embodied in human buildings, Montserrat on the left, and I'm not sure what that is on the right. I don't know where that's from. Maybe some of you know. Embodied in human beings and relationships. And the tour guides are the folks who have been there before you. At least I hope so. Otherwise, they're not going to do a lot of good. And you might have been in some of those tour guides, with some of those tour guides. So, again, I found this very evocative. And the phrase suggests, in fact, that the tour guides are in the know. They're in a privileged position. And you say, well, that's great for the tour guides, but what about me? How do I get in the know? So it becomes a question of liturgy and religious experience. Is it possible to transfer religious experience? Well, no, not really, but maybe a little bit. And how does liturgy enable us to transfer religious experience? We can get a taste of another's religious experience by joining in their expression. Because, as you know, and of course if you have read Annie Dillard, she says at least Episcopal liturgy, but also Roman Catholic liturgy, is often something similar to watching bears dance. It wasn't a compliment. But we begin to first clumsily imitate what was other people's original experience, authentic religious experience, and we participate awkwardly, as Annie Dillard characterizes us as dancing bears, until what was foreign to us becomes more and more our own through ritual repetition. Think of yourselves. You know, I was telling one of these bad stories before the talk. How did your children come to know how to do the sign of the cross? You took their hand and you made the sign of the cross on their bodies. They didn't have a clue as to what you were doing until gradually they became familiar with it and became able to own it. And this is why I said to someone, I would like some of the priest-presiders to take as seriously that kind of teaching, to move the hand here and here and here and here. We have a presider where I live, and his opening greeting is, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I have no idea what he did. I haven't a clue. I don't know what this thing is here. But it's supposed to mean something. You're supposed to do it right, for crying out loud. Not, anyway. You can tell I can't stay ideal for very long. All right, we do not have another's religious experience, but we can catch on to the reality, begin to own it, and open ourselves with courage and hope to our own human-divine dialogue. But we also know that the human-divine dialogue is always given as gift. So it's always, we practice with it until we own it, and then we say, the Lord be with me as I do this. And God shows up. Amazingly. So while this divine-human encounter comes to expression in some initial form by an individual or a community, its enactment over time gives others a chance to get into the dance. The liturgical tradition is dynamic by virtue of the fact that it's an evolving expression of evolving community and communities' encounter with the living God. Or at least it should be. So here we have now liturgy naturally involves a who. And in the Jewish and Christian traditions, you know very well that we believe in a personal God who is able to enter into relationships with us and has chosen to do that for some reason that is absolutely unbelievable to us and offer us covenant relationships. The liturgy is deeply a personal experience. One person and another person. A human person and a divine person. While language for God is fraught with problems, we all know that, trying to figure out what words do we say to talk about the living God. We can say that God is at least personal. Meaning that God couldn't be less than we are. If we are personal beings, able to encounter another in love, God has to be at least that good. And much more besides. So that's what I just said in so many words. So now we say the liturgy mediates these divine human encounters over time through our participation and in the power of the Spirit. Okay, now it involves a how. God uses human capacities in order to interact with us. Capacities of relationality and the yearnings of our transcendent spirit, and capacities for using symbolic expressions. Eventually, we learn that as much as we are reaching out to divine mystery first has been reaching out to us and is awaiting our response. When we celebrate the liturgy with openness, we make ourselves vulnerable to hear and receive and offer a profound love. Hardly noticing how it happens, we awkward dancing bears start moving with the music and become true dancers with the divine spirit. So liturgy puts words in our mouth. It invites actions with our bodies, more than this. It shapes our imaginations. It offers us a glimpse of who the divine is insofar as we can know, which is not very much. And it also gives us or invites us how we might respond to divine mysteries' offer of relationship and love. Liturgy shapes our religious experience through the symbol world. The symbols that our bodies know how to use and interpret and say and dance and move our bodies and everything else. So language, space, and time. We are in the season of Lent, and I thought I would be very attentive to the season, and all my slides have a purple banner. You can see that is purple. That is purple. Okay. So, the wonders of modern engineering. Art, music, and dance, that's symbolic worlds there. Sound and silence, fragrant oils, running water, rising incense, and so much more than that. The symbols, the actions, and the intentions of the liturgy become our expression through practice. We join our voices in praise and thanksgiving and we become people of praise and people of thanksgiving. Don't forget to say thank you. Raise your children right. Don't forget to say thank you. All right, I'll do it this time. You know, but then over time, it becomes this sincere expression of self. So let me expand a little bit on the liturgy as an evolving and organic reality. Over time, the liturgy grows and develops as later generations add their own dance steps to those initial expressions of a given individual and community. The evolving liturgy is meant to engage every generation to begin or to continue its own relationship with God by rehearsing past symbolic expressions and their acculturation, and then add their own experiences and expressions. At least it should. What's the problem? It isn't doing it right now. It's not doing it right now. All right, so let me give you an example of how liturgical expressions of an earlier age, very simply, find their way into contemporary worship. Now you have some pope like Gregory the Great, Leo the Great. They wrote hundreds of prayers out of their religious experience or their community's religious experience. They were writing them in Latin. So in sacramentaries, when they were recorded, when we had sacramentaries, they were verbatim presentations of the prayer. But what happens when you translate Gregory the Great? Every translation is an interpretation, always, everywhere. So we have, this is a prayer that was used in the 1985 Missal that was eliminated from our practice. But it was the alternate opening prayer of the Christmas Mass at dawn. Now, we say, should we be taking seriously the writings of dead white men, as you hear many of your students saying, or worse? Look at this prayer. Your eternal word leaped down from heaven in the silent watches of the night. And now the church is filled with wonder at the nearness of her God. That's a prayer worth keeping. That is stunning. Absolutely stunning. I wish I could express myself so well. But we have gifted writers who do it better than some of us ordinary folks. And those gifted writers hopefully get collected into books and into the memory of the community and show up again in the 1985 Missal with that kind of passion and depth. Now let me speak, I have two more sections in this part. Memory and presence. The salvation history story takes on human flesh in Jesus. That is our belief. And it is our memory of that saving story that is an essential part of the content of our liturgical worship. Our memory of a saving story. Again, you have so many people say, I don't get anything out of it. What do you get out of remembering your grandmother's favorite stories? It's just another category. It's just a different category. We don't think of it in terms of that. And our acts of liturgical worship are acts of memorial in the strongest sense. So the human capacity to keep memory And through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit, the Church can claim that its memorial of the salvation story is made effectual in the liturgy and in the lives of those celebrating. Once again, we employ our human capacities of symbolic speech and cultural embeddedness, as well as our powers of memory, to express this saving story. Not only do we gain entry into the divine-human encounter, but we also gain entry into the saving story with all its specificity of the Christ revelation through the power of the Spirit. The claims that we make, it's more than, if I tell the story with a lot of passion, it will be imbibed by the people of God. Yes, it would really be nice if someone would read the readings with passion. But we don't depend just on that. We depend upon the Holy Spirit being with us when we do the kinds of things we've been asked to do. So here we have the Roman tradition has placed an enormous emphasis on what God does in the liturgy and what human persons do. The dialogical nature of the liturgy is writ large in patterns of prayer and action. God's offer of a saving presence is put forth in the offer of forgiveness, in the proclamation of the word, in the actions of washing, anointing, laying on of hands, in words of consecration, blessing, forgiveness, and on and on. The worshiping community responds in its turn to these offers by proclamations of praise, in prayers of thanksgiving. The presencing of all parties is real. I'm using that very technical theological term that is our highest way of expressing real presence. And I'm saying, in a relationship, what's real is your presence and the one you love. And that's real. And the one we love is divine mystery, who loves us and has promised presence. So we have at the end of the institution narrative, Jesus says at the Last Supper, when you do this as my memorial, I promise I will be with you if you keep faithful memory of me. That's what we're inviting our younger people into in our faith tradition. Into a relationship of love with the living God. If it's less than that, I'm going home and taking up painting houses. Okay, so that first part. So let's take a break a little bit. I've been talking, and would you like to have some reactions or responses to what I have said so far?
Raise your hand if you do. Katie and I have microphones.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little bit on what you mean by liturgy. I looked up the official definition, but I still am not sure if that relates to the Mass and all the other sacraments. So if you could elaborate on that, thank you.
Next cough drop. Liturgy is a generic term, a very generic term. It encompasses every ritual that community has, from baptism to anointing of the sick, to Eucharistic celebrations, to confirmation. They're all specific liturgies. In our ordinary parlance, people say, I'm going to the liturgy. What do they mean? I'm going to Mass because they don't think of other rituals as liturgy. Or we've gotten so Eucharitized out of our systems that the only liturgy we think is important is the Eucharist. So liturgy of the hours is a liturgy, etc. Okay, does that help? When I'm teaching, I'm always very specific and say, if I mean the Eucharist, I'll say the Eucharist. Because there's so many liturgies you could include. How would you know? Yes, sir.
When you say that the liturgy basically brings together religious experience and it is transferred from one person to the other, to the community, is there a correlation between the involvement of the community in the liturgy and that transference? In other words, rather than simply having a vertical kind of relationship or a drive-in theater kind of relationship, but one where there's a community involvement, does that impact that transference?
Okay. I want to clarify one thing. Religious experience doesn't automatically transfer. We catch it. You know, we get the drift. It becomes our own, and we have our own religious experience. I learned to dance by looking at somebody else who dances and practicing. At first, I'm bad, I'm awkward, and little by little, I become a dancer and have the same kind of experience that the professional dancer had when we started this. So just to clarify that. And then secondly, the experience, this interpersonal relationship that is at the heart of liturgy, depends on your engagement. It absolutely depends on your engagement. You're not going to have a religious experience if you're there doing something else. There's a conscious, God works with us as we are. And to the degree that we can engage in relationship, God says, I'll do that with you. But it takes relationship, it takes energy. It takes energy. Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, would you say that liturgy can be an individual experience? Or does it have to be in a community or shared with other people? Can you have
I would say
liturgical experience by yourself?
I would say ritual experience is just another generic type word. Can be, think of the simplest thing. What do you do when you get up out of bed? You go to the shower, and tell me if you don't take a shower in the same order every day. Right? That's private ritual practice. But when we talk about the Christian understanding of liturgy, we presume community. So there's an expectation that the revelation of God has come to a community of disciples of Jesus. And when they get together and do it together, it's communal liturgical celebration. But yes, there are lots of individualistic rituals, and they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Okay, I think we better, yes, please.
Can you define the Christian community? Because I come to the mosque every day and people, different religions come. And how do you define a Christian community when different religions come?
I just heard this phrase last week, and it really struck me. Somebody said that we're doing a bad job in using baptismal language. We're saying, I was baptized 47 years ago. That event back there. This author said, we should introduce ourselves as I am a baptized person. Meaning, it's now, it has ramifications, it has responsibilities, it has gifts. So to say, I think we're still caught, and I said this to Anne as we began our session. Before the Vatican Council, the liturgy was seen as effective when the right person said the right words in the right place with the right book. People did not have any expectation that their faith was being built up or they were getting anything out of it. It's objectively effective. But look at us today. And we do ask that question. I don't get anything out of it. Well, the RCIA says you're supposed to get something out of the liturgy. Good liturgy builds faith, bad liturgy breaks it down. So the Christian community who sits there like a lump on a log isn't doing its bit, its maximal best. So it takes liturgy. We've got to put energy into it. Okay, all right, I think we have to move on. I think I did that. Now this is my interlude. Good God, girl, get a grip. You're probably wondering what I've been smoking. You're wondering whether I'm sober. You're wondering whether I've ever been in a church in the last 25 years. If what I have said is the ideal, why does it look the way it does in many places? Not all, by any means. So what I'm now going to do is turn the flip side of the ideal to the real and introduce a little bit of critique. I could list many examples of what has gone wrong in the liturgy in recent years, but for our concerns here, I only want to focus on one. While there are many reasons for ecclesial disenchantment, I believe that our liturgical tradition is in crisis, principally because we have failed to let the liturgy be flexible enough to incorporate new religious experiences and their expressions into the repertoire of the tradition. Do you agree? Yes. At this moment, there is literally no easily accessible process for including original prayers and actions in the official liturgical books. I am not just speaking of the restraint placed on ISIL that Anne talked about before, eliminating their ability to create original text. They were mandated to create original text, and then that mandate was taken away in 1999, 2000. I am speaking of the larger concern of members of the wider church community not being able to make a contribution out of their own religious experience and expression. The rigidity of our fixed liturgical forms and our very controlled processes of approval of official liturgical celebrations has not allowed a natural ebb and flow between the past, the present, and the future. So now, pertinent to our context here of why women have stayed, we might also touch on why women have left, still focusing on what is missing in our liturgical practice. There are innumerable examples of feminist circles who have been ritualizing it since at least the 1980s. They have been practicing with new ritual symbols, with new ritual language, with new ritual gestures, with new naming of God, and on and on and on. Now, there's two sides to that coin. Number one, they needed to go in a private place and do it so they could have the freedom to experiment without somebody else coming in and saying, you're not doing that right. But They also have been doing it in private circumstances because of the restrictions placed on Catholic ritual behavior that has certain preconditions. So it's a both and. Experiments with God are, in spite of the fact that women make up more than half of churchgoers, to say the least, and an even greater percentage of pastoral workers, feminist issues have remained only at the margins at best of official church structures and concerns. One of the things that I am thrilled to be reading as I go through each synod document that has come out is that the women's issues, well, multiple, and we don't want to put all women in the same basket because we're individuals as well, but they keep coming up again and again and again. And my hope is that it will make some difference because we're speaking out and we're saying, you've got to be concerned of us, about us, with us, and for us. So, let's see, I'm skipping around a little bit. Okay, so that's my brief interlude. We want to have a few responses to that. I just wanted to put in a piece of serious critique, for this. So that was my one example to use for that. Please.
I just want to say thank you for your service and all that you've done, and thank you for your wonderful presentation. I guess, so many of us see women just striving in all areas of business, law, being architects, doing everything. And you've hit on, the nail on the head that so many women are upset. Quite frankly, so many of us want to see women as priests and deacons and beyond just doing the listening sessions and hopefully being part of the synod. Was just curious, what are the tactical steps that Holy Trinity as a parish can do to create a church where we might see women have those roles as deacons and priests?
What do I say? Well, I think the first thing that I would want to say is that Holy Trinity Parish doesn't belong simply to itself. It is part of a larger community of faith. And some of you go to many communities of faith from one week to the next. I don't think it's possible to move everybody at the same time. I think there has to be some efforts where somebody steps out and does something new. That's why I gave the example of the feminist liturgies, because they were places where women tried things that they had never done before. Let me tell you this story. When I was getting my MDiv at Yale, we had a Catholic Students Association. And in the chapel basement, we had like a crypt chapel, and there was an altar in the center of the crypt. It was a lovely place to sing. It just reverberated with it. So we took turns presiding. And I was invited to preside. This was like in 1982, 83. I'm different today. It's a long time ago. I tried, in my presiding role, to stand in the center of the altar. I said to myself, self, move your foot and get in the center. Thank you. I could not place myself in that privileged position. I didn't have enough experience, I didn't have enough courage, I didn't have enough imagination to put myself in a leadership position, because up to that point in time, only leaders I saw in liturgical worship were men. So I think in your own community here, you have so many examples of people stepping out and doing what their carries and what their gifts enable them to do. There are some Catholic communities who have gone ahead and have had women ordained by bishops of the bishops who were ordained in the Danube, in that tradition there. But I think it's a fringe number, and probably most of our bishops have never even heard of it. And if they did hear of it, they would all be, what's the word? What's the word? When you're thrown out of the church, excommunicated. Because one of the rules is you cannot, without the right person, in the right circumstances, you cannot embody a Eucharistic celebration, and being a woman is a canonical impediment to being a priest. But we know all these other things are going on. So the question is, what's going to happen when there's a groundswell? And the Synod process, hopefully, is a groundswell. I love Pope Francis, but he still doesn't get women as well as he should. Does that help? It doesn't give you the answers. I'm sorry. I don't have all those answers. Yes?
Thank you. I think it's really astute to point to the lack of flexibility as one of the big, kind of like a dam ready to burst of our creativity or our ability to enculturate in time and not just in different spaces and places. And I think that strikes me as really interesting because the place where that has happened is in our music. And that's also where the biggest fights are, is about what our liturgical musical styles are or should be, because that's the one place where we've had a lot of creativity or a lot more freedom to try things. And it's my question at the same time, though, in today's topic, is that's still a really male-dominated space, church musicianship, church composition especially. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that.
I'm a classical musician myself. I'm a pianist and an organist. I have great respect for the classical tradition of music. It's wonderful. However, it's not the only thing that music does exist on that level. I think the bad music we used in 1969 and 70, Michael Rothebauer, etc., you know it as well as I do, moved us to have somebody like the St. Louis Jesuits who wrote somewhat better music and put scripture in people's mouths and imaginations. And first they did it with the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. And then they had a conversion moment and they decided to start writing texts that use the New Testament as well. But they put the transformation of the Catholic community was knowing scripture the way we never had known it before. And they did it. Homilies are another opportunity to do groundbreaking work. Does that do?
Catherine, you might want to go to your last part, and then we'll open up for questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, here, the liturgy and the new cosmology. Now, just very quickly, you know some of this material already. A cosmology is a way of seeing the world. What's truly real? Is the world round or flat? Is the earth round or flat? Round. If it was flat and you were Christopher Columbus, how would you regard Christopher Columbus if, in fact, he goes sailing? Bye-bye. Over. So you have reality and you have associated behaviors that make sense with that reality. Okay? It's also a source of meaning and value. Cosmology also is an evolution. Evolution has transformed our world from biblical to scientific, from static to dynamic, from the use of the naked eye to enormous advances in technology. What we're calling the new, I'm going through this, I'm missing a good bit of this, but that's all right. What we are calling the new cosmology suggests that the universe is expanding in a sequence of irreversible evolutionary events of which humanity is a part. It is developing toward greater and greater complexity and consciousness, and has been said, humanity is the universe come to consciousness. What we have yet to be at this point is unknown. So that's in a nutshell. Okay, those are your quick ways to understand cosmology. My interest is, what are the new tools, the new symbol structures that the new cosmology puts in our basket that we can employ in the liturgy? And I have listed 3 which seem to be helpful, at least. There's many more, but I chose 3. New images, new patterns of relationships, and changing narratives. New views of outer space. When I did this PowerPoint on the plane coming back from London last week, and I couldn't find my pictures from the new James Webb Space Telescope. This is the Hubble. If you compare this picture with this James Webb, you will find quadrillion more stars than Hubble was able to provide for us. The new views of outer space, for example, the Eagle Nebula, for example, the Horsehead Nebula or the blue pulsar, when you think of putting that, the blue pulsar star, in stained glass, that would be stunning. You probably all know that there's a moon rock in the first window on the right-hand side going into the Episcopal Cathedral. Well, that's a start, but that was in 68, something like that. We could do better. But, you know, we're talking about images that could be used as illuminations, that could be used as PowerPoint presentations during some liturgical services of some kind or another, because this is what people see when they're looking at National Geographic. It's not too advanced. The Webb telescope says now there are over 2 trillion galaxies with 100 billion stars in each. And that's just from reading the news. And people want to know, why, when I get in church, do I never hear anything like that? We're just bifurcated. 2 different lines. Oops, there we go. That was fun. Also, views of inner space are changing as much as the views of outer space. So we've moved from the naked eye to microscopes, to electronic microscopes, to atomic microscopes, etc. So here we have big, fat, red blood cells, but even tinier bacteria. We're now able to take pictures of them. The most accurate image of an atom is on your left. We now have that. On your right was the first photograph of an atom. But even the color, the effect of the color, it's exciting. How do we weave this into all our celebrations? Changing relationships. Everything is related, according to the new cosmology, everything is related from the smallest element in the micro world to the largest element in the macro world. We are literally created from stardust. Literally. And anything that happens in one place in the universe affects all things in the universe. When I started doing this work, I thought my idea of God was pretty big. I said, yeah, it's not that big. When I started looking at this material, and I said, God created a universe that this week we know contains over 2 trillion galaxies. How big is your God? How big is your God who could do such a thing? And that's until we get the next space telescope and we find out that it's 10 times more that. I was at one of our high schools in London last week, and one of the youngsters asked me, one of the juniors, asked me, does the Imago Dei work in other planets and galaxies? The kids want to know. We are made in the image and likeness of God. Does it count if you're living on Mars? Big questions. They're not afraid of the big questions. And we've got to start having answers. So, changing narratives. Finally, to finish up, I know just 2 minutes here. The human story can no longer be told in terms of life on Earth, but only in relationship to the whole universe. We are the universe come to consciousness. Well, perhaps the Easter Vigil readings could include the new universe story as the backdrop for the Christ story. The Eucharistic prayer, which recounts the story of salvation, would need to be rewritten to account for God's saving acts at the micro and macro levels. And if you know my book, Liturgy and the New Cosmology, I have a Eucharistic prayer that I've modified since I wrote that originally, but it kind of is basically the same. But this is the collect that I wrote. Blessed are you, holy God of all that was, is, and ever shall be. In your goodness and infinite generosity, you poured yourself out in creation from the first flaring forth of matter and energy to this very day. Open our eyes in awe to the wonder of your universe. Turn our hearts to gratitude for your ongoing work of creation, and awaken our hope for the dream of a new creation when you shall be all in all. So it's pulling on new images but traditional theology. Okay, I think our time is over. So,
Well, we have time, a few minutes for questions.
okay.
All right, questions, comments, John?
Yes, on your last point, I think Laudato Si gives us opportunities to adapt Eucharist and liturgy as Earth community, and locating ourselves within the Earth community. To an earlier point you were making, though, I was going to say special occasions generate flexibility, but somehow we don't continue that. For example, after 9/11 or other tragic incidents, people develop and adapt their liturgy, or when a particular community needs a healing from something that's taken place.
That's right.
But we seem to lose that.
Right. Look how ritually proficient our people are after tragedy. Nobody's handing out Roman missals to tell them what to do. They're bringing up flowers and bouquets and ribbons and whatever, and putting them across the place of death and destruction. We are ritual animals, and we can do better than we're presently doing. Thank you.
Catherine, do you see a place? Is this what?
Yeah. Where? Oh, there you are. Excuse me. I
Do you
didn't
see
see
a place for learning materials such as The Journey of the Universe,
Yes.
the Brian Swim documentary?
Yes. Right.
But I think it's hard for people to access that. I feel it needs to be presented in a
I
a community context.
I think what has happened is that the religious women in the last 30 years have done exactly that. But we haven't necessarily invited our co-workers, our friends, our colleagues to do that with us. So the exposure has been there, but it's been limited. I think you're right, it's good critique.
I feel like when I watch it, I feel like I'm having a spiritual experience.
Sure.
And I want to be able to get it to my friends and my children and my grandchildren, but
Right.
I don't know how.
How does ecumenism fit into your thinking about the liturgy, whether Orthodox, Protestant, or does it?
As I began, I spoke in very broad terms between the Christian traditions, plural, and the Jewish community, and our traditions of our understanding of God as a personal God, etc. I think there's much to be learned from those traditions that don't have such hard and fast rules regarding liturgical evolution. So, I mean, I think that's an opportunity for us to learn something from our brothers and sisters from the Protestant tradition or the Presbyterian tradition or the Orthodox tradition. It has to be part of the picture. I agree. Okay, last question.
Okay, so I hope I can segue a little bit off of the last two questions in asking how you view the women in the church and everything, that movement and the richness of it. To what extent do you see, is there actually an interaction, a cross-fertilization with the monastic movement, which so many, I personally is, where I draw most of my actual experiences from, and where I meet so many people who say the same thing. Why is it that we cannot access this and share? Why is this not shared more widely? How can I share it with my children, grandchildren, others, in a way that's accessible? And it is so accessible in places like Shalem or the Richard Rohr take on things. So if you could comment, and also just your take on, as you look ahead on the horizon, to what extent do you see those movements kind of joining, or perhaps they already are? So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are.
Well, I can't quite get it up. I'm sorry for my voice. The work on women in history in the last 30, 40 years has been stupendous. The work on religious monastics, women religious monastics, and others, the Beguines and other non-traditional communities, has brought us to such a knowledge of what women were in fact doing. I mean, when the woman was a bishop, the prioress of a community had the authority of a bishop in some circumstances and carried crozier. And that was in a woman's world. So there's just so much to learn from so many places. I don't know where to start. But they are out there, but you have to work for them. And it's worth the work. It's worth the work. Okay? All right, just the very last. You have to go to church.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to share with the community. My name is Jane Malhotra, and I'm a Holy Trinity parishioner. And 4 years ago, I co-founded with somebody from another parish a home mass community led by women priests. It started as an email to 15 people, and it grew. We were only going to do 3 of these, and it's been 4 years. And we have 400 people on the email list, and it's definitely the work of the Holy Spirit. I find that, it's a very creative space for the liturgy, for music. Humor is all part of of the movement, and I think that's kind of an outgrowth of when you limit somebody.
That's right. It's like a balloon. You take a balloon and you squeeze it, and a little bit comes out here, and a little bit comes out there, and a little bit comes out down here. So you can't squeeze people too much and expect they're not going to react with some creativity and find another alternative. That's the position we're in. But I don't want to hold you up. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.